We have an action-packed week ahead. Prime Minister Modi is traveling to South Africa. He will attend the BRICS Summit, but that's not what we're talking about tonight. We want to focus on another potential meeting that's creating a lot of buzz. The India-China bilateral talks. We understand that a meeting is being planned. Prime Minister Modi could meet President Xi Jinping of China on the sidelines of the BRICS Summit. They're likely to discuss the border standoff. And I don't need to spell this out. This is a big deal. Prime Minister Modi has not met President Xi Jinping for almost 3 years. The border situation led to a complete breakdown in dialogue. There was no top-level engagement at all. But there was a brief and informal encounter last year, the details of which came out only recently. In 2022, the two leaders met in Bali. They were attending the G20 summit that was being hosted by Indonesia. Initially, New Delhi described this encounter as just a handshake, just an exchange of pleasantries. But that was not the full story. Turns out, Prime Minister Modi and President Xi also discussed the border. The Chinese side claims there was a quote-unquote important consensus and that the leaders spoke about the need to stabilize the relationship. Those are the words that they used. We did not have the specifics. But in the last month, we've seen several high-profile meetings. Last week, India and China held military talks. There was no breakthrough, but we did get a joint statement. It said remaining issues will be resolved in an expeditious manner. So have the doors open for direct negotiations now. Will the Himalayan border standoff be resolved in Johannesburg? Here's what we can expect. Since last week, China has been dropping hints. First, their top diplomat in South Africa spoke. He was discussing the upcoming BRICS summit with journalists, and this is what he said about the bilateral. I'm confident that as two nations, two countries, we will have direct talks, direct meetings. I cannot say there is tension between us, but as neighboring countries, we have many common interests. At the same time, we have some problems. Typical China, always downplaying what's happening at the border. And what is New Delhi saying about all of this? Not very much at this point. Officially, there is no meeting scheduled yet. Indian diplomats are dodging direct questions about this. More importantly, they're not dismissing the possibility of a meeting. So there is a real chance that the leaders could meet. Fun fact. Since 2014, Prime Minister Modi and President Xi have met 19 times. The Bali meeting was the last one. But that was not a formal engagement. They've had no bilateral meet since the 2020 clashes in Galwan. So a meeting now will be significant. And it may not be a pleasant conversation. For starters, the India-China border remains tense. There is an unprecedented build-up on both sides. Two friction points still remain. In the last 3 years, India has airlifted 70,000 troops to be stationed at the border with China. Also, heavy weapons like tanks and artillery guns. They weigh over 9,000 tons. China maintains a similar level of deployment. India wants a de-escalation to normalize the relationship, but China has refused to budge. Then there's a deadlock over the BRICS agenda too. Over the expansion of BRICS, the idea of an alternative currency, and contemporary economic issues. All of this will be taken up at the summit. And on all these issues, India and China stand on the opposite sides. Take the BRICS expansion, for instance. China wants to turn it into a bigger group, something that rivals the G7, but India opposes that. New Delhi wants the BRICS to be more selective. So there is an impasse. The war in Ukraine is also casting its shadow. Russia wants the BRICS to go tough on the West. China endorses that position from Russia. But India prefers a more measured approach. And this has already landed the summit in controversy. The Russian president will not be attending in person. He will join via video conferencing. That's because of a legal complication that he wants to avoid. You see, the ICC, or the International Criminal Court, has issued an arrest warrant against Putin. This was in the month of March. They issued an arrest warrant. Now, South Africa is an ICC signatory. So if Putin shows up on South African territory, they're obliged to arrest him. Even if they don't, it would be an awkward situation for all those involved. So to avoid this, both sides mutually agreed to host Putin virtually. Meanwhile, New Delhi is navigating its own dilemmas. Next month, it will host the G20 summit. There is no consensus on a joint statement yet. The G20 is divided over the war in Ukraine. How can India, as president, overcome these divisions to push for a common agenda? How can India champion the cause of the global south without being caught in the politics over Russia's war? Perhaps by engaging with China. It's a long shot, but it is worth a try. Xi Jinping has not confirmed his attendance yet. His own economy is in a mess. So the Communist Party is under pressure. Beijing needs stability. And a border standoff with India does not help them at this point. So it is in China's interest to end it. The G20 summit gives India some leverage. It should not hesitate in using it. Now, Pakistan is called the home of the Dusra. It's a type of ball in cricket. It basically spins the other way. Pakistani spinners are known for this confusing delivery. Well, turns out, so is their president. I'm talking about this man, Arif Alvi. He's been a spectator for most of 2023, but suddenly he wants in on the action. On Sunday, the president posted this message on social media. It was a bombshell. Listen to what he said. And I'm quoting from the words of the Pakistani president. I did not sign the Official Secrets Amendment Bill 2023 and Pakistan Army Amendment Bill 2023 as I disagreed with these laws. I asked my staff to return the bills unsigned. However, I have found out today that my staff undermined my will and command. What exactly is the president talking about? Before exiting office, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and his government passed multiple laws in Pakistan, and most of them were controversial. But two of them stand out. One, the Official Secrets Amendment Bill, and two, the Pakistan Army Amendment Bill. Now, these bills had two objectives: tighten the noose around Imran Khan and strengthen the Pakistan Army. For example, the Official Secrets Act cracks down on leaking intelligence. Say you reveal information about an agent or a diplomatic cable or an informant, you can be jailed for 3 years and fined $34,000. That's the Official Secrets Act. The Army Act is worse. It provides up to 5 years of rigorous imprisonment for disclosing information that affects the army. In simple words, these bills are anti-democratic. They give the Pakistan Army sweeping powers. The power to crack down on dissidents, to jail political leaders, and to keep tabs on rivals. Both these bills were pushed through Parliament before August the 9th, in fact. The final step was presidential assent. Now, everyone assumed it was just a matter of time. In fact, some Pakistani websites reported that Arif Alvi, the president, had signed these bills. Well, that's when the clarification came. Arif Alvi says he did not sign either bill, that he sent them back to the Parliament. But tell that to the caretaker government of Pakistan. They have already charged people under these new laws. No prizes for guessing who? Imran Khan and his trusted aide Shah Mahmood Qureshi. Both men have been charged under the amended Official Secrets Act. But how is that possible? If the president did not sign it, how has it become law? Pakistan's caretaker law minister has an answer. He says the president has two options when presented with a bill. A, sign and approve it, or B, send back with suggestions. But Arif Alvi apparently invented a third option. He did not approve it, nor did he give suggestions. So after 10 days, it automatically became the law. I know it is bizarre, but then again, it's Pakistan. Constitutional clarity is not exactly their strong suit. Arif Alvi is blaming his staff for what happened. Did they forge his signature? Did they not highlight his suggestions? Or did they just keep the bill hidden away for 10 days? And at this point, anything is possible. But a bigger question is this: why is Arif Alvi taking on the establishment? He was Imran Khan's pick to become president in 2018. He was a founding member of his party, the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. So the bond is quite old. When Imran Khan was first arrested, the president criticized it. He said the ex-prime minister had been quote-unquote manhandled. But once the army's crackdown began, he was cut to size. He became a spectator. So why is he entering the field again? Well, his presidential term ends next month. There is no official word on whether he will get an extension, so maybe he thought he has nothing to lose. Whatever the reason, Imran Khan's party is thrilled. Look at their response to Arif Alvi's statement. Save this tweet from the Honorable President. Use this to teach your kids that it's important to speak the truth and serve your designation with dignity. That's what Imran Khan's party is saying. What is the Pakistan Army saying? Well, nothing so far, but the caretaker government is calling it a matter of grave concern. Chances are the judiciary will also get involved at some point. This episode is a reminder of how tense things are in Pakistan. Imran Khan may be down, but he is not out. He still has friends in high places, and one of them is the country's president. The question is, how far will these allies go for him? Will they support him when the army closes in? A lot hinges on that. With the elections delayed to February, this is a crucial time for Pakistan. The army is hoping to put Imran Khan away for good. But like a bad habit, he keeps coming back. It's great entertainment for people elsewhere, but spare a thought for the people of Pakistan. This circus, called Pakistani politics, holds the key to their future. I have a question for you. What is the most dangerous combination in politics? Inflation and elections. It's a nightmare for any politician. Here in India, the government is facing that deadly combination, inflation and elections. Inflation is at a 15-month high. Food prices are up by double digits, and multiple elections are around the corner. So how is the government responding? By controlling exports. Onion is the latest commodity. India has imposed a 40% export duty on onions. 40%. How does that help? The export duty makes Indian onion more expensive abroad, and more expensive equals less demand. So the idea is to discourage the export of onions, to retail more supply in the Indian market, and hopefully to stabilize prices. Speaking of which, onion prices have risen by 20% from July to August. Chances are they will rise further. The current rate is around 30 rupees per kilogram. Experts say it will double by September, maybe even reach 70 rupees per kilogram. The question is why? Unlike cereals, onion is not affected by the war in Ukraine. So why are prices rising? You can blame climate change and erratic weather for that. India has 3 onion seasons. The season from April to June dominates supply. Around 65% of India's output comes from that season, April to June. Now, this supply is supposed to last until September. By then, the next round of harvest begins. It's usually a smooth transition, but this year it was not so smooth. Onions harvested during the summer are rotting faster. The unseasonal rains have affected their shelf life. So come September, there could be a crunch, hence the export duty. On paper, the duty is supposed to last until the 31st of December this year, but a lot depends on how things play out. If the price rise continues, the government may consider bigger steps, like banning onion exports altogether. It was last done in 2020. But if the prices cool down, the duty could be removed. And traders will be hoping for that. Most of them are protesting the export duty. In fact, trade has been indefinitely halted at Asia's largest onion market, which is located in Nashik, in Maharashtra. The question is, how quickly can prices be cooled? Let's look at what happened with tomatoes. 2 weeks back, the price was 260 rupees per kilogram, and now it's under 100 rupees. So things are looking better. Not ideal, but definitely better. The government is also selling subsidized tomatoes from vans and public shops. Those cost just 40 rupees per kilo. The plan is to do the same with onions. Government shops and vans will be selling onion for 25 rupees per kg. The buffer stock is also being increased. It was 3 million tons earlier. Now it will be increased to 5 million tons. So fingers crossed the price will come down. But at what cost? India is the largest exporter of onions in the world. In the first half of 2023, trade was up 63%. Dozens of countries buy onions from us, like Bangladesh, Nepal, Malaysia, the UAE, and Sri Lanka. How will they respond to this move? And the onion move is not an isolated one. First, India banned the export of wheat, then non-basmati white rice. Now, higher export duty on onions, and reports say sugar could be next. There is talk of banning the export or setting quotas. Now, such sudden decisions will affect credibility. They will leave importers in a limbo. And that is one problem. The second problem is that of climate change. Let's face it, our weather is more erratic than ever. But are the farmers prepared for it? Has the government prepared them for it? Tomato prices were up because of weather, and now onion prices are up because of the same reason. We need to find solutions for this. When you have 1.4 billion people to feed, you can't afford volatility. You need an assured supply. Maybe onions will jolt the government to action. They're not as important in our diet as rice or potato, but onions are politically savvy. You hear inflation and you think about two things, fuel and onions. In fact, India's 1980 general election was called the onion election. Tells you how important they are. The current government also realizes this, which is why the export duty has been announced in the first place. But will it be enough to plug the supply issues? Guess we'll have to wait and watch. I will start our next story with a flashback. The year was 1976. The Soviet Union was still intact. Leonid Brezhnev ruled the Kremlin. Moscow was gearing up for a space launch. It was sending its Luna 24 to the moon. This was the Soviet Union's last shot at the space race. They were leading it in the beginning, but soon the US took over. They sent humans to the moon, and the space race was never the same again. So the Luna 24 was almost like a last-ditch effort in 1976. But little did the Soviet Union know that it would also be their last mission to the moon. Cut to 2023, 47 years have passed. Russia under Vladimir Putin has made another attempt. They launched the Luna 25 mission. It took off on the 11th of August. It was supposed to land on the south pole of the moon. It was supposed to be a historic first, but it was not to be. On the 19th of August, Russia lost contact with the probe, and after that, everything went downhill. The spacecraft spun out of control and soon crashed onto the moon. Russia's space agency, Roscosmos, has since issued a statement. It said, and I'm quoting, "The apparatus moved into an unpredictable orbit and ceased to exist as a result of a collision with the surface of the moon." Basically, they're calling it a technical glitch. Roscosmos will set up a commission to look into the failure. Well, whatever the conclusion, this is a big blow for Russia. The Soviet Union was the original space superpower. It launched the first satellite into space, the Sputnik 1. It sent the first man into space, Yuri Gagarin. It sent the first woman into space, Valentina Tereshkova. They even sent the first dog into space, a dog named Laika. They were behind the first spacewalk, the first lunar probe, you name it, and the Soviet Union had already done it. So Moscow was leading this race. But then came the Apollo moon landings of 1969. They gave America the edge. In 1991, things took a turn for the worse for Moscow. The Soviet Union had just collapsed and Russia reorganized its space program. It was under a state agency called Roscosmos. But things were never the same. That's because the agency was cash-strapped. In 2020, the budget for Russia's space agency was around $1.4 billion. Compare that to NASA's budget for the same year, $22.6 billion. Despite this wide gap, Roscosmos did not give up. It collaborated with other agencies, like the NASA and the European Space Agency. It had the knowledge and the expertise, but it did not move with the times, it seems. While the world explored or focused on the exploration of Mars and beyond, Russia was still stuck in the orbit of yesteryears. The headlines were not about historic launches anymore. Instead, they talked about technical failures, about budget constraints, an aging workforce, bureaucratic inertia. The most ironic twist of fate was satellite launches. There was a time when Russia was the go-to choice for launching payloads. Over the years, it found itself relying on other countries. It rented out its launch facilities to competitors. It's almost like having a vintage sports car and lending it to others to drive. Basically, Russia's space agency was stuck in a time warp, basking in past glory. The war in Ukraine made things worse. Russia was heavily sanctioned. Its space sector suffered. Initially, Russia and Europe planned to partner on the Luna 25. But that partnership ended with a war. And this lunar mission became all the more important for Russia. They had a point to prove. They had to regain their lost glory.
The question is, will the Kremlin and the Ministry of Finance be ready to fund projects like this? Because the development will take a long time. It will take years and billions of rubles, while the outcome is questionable. Will they be ready to spend time and money for another embarrassment?
With this crash, Russia's cosmic slide is evident. From being a space superpower to resembling a rocket in free fall. Their first mission in almost 5 decades has ended in a crash. But the focus on the moon won't end anytime soon. As we speak, India's Chandrayaan-3 is making its way to the moon. It is supposed to land on the 23rd of August. The world is watching its trajectory. If it lands successfully, it will be the first to land on the moon's south pole. So the Lunar 25 may have failed, but the space race is just heating up. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story, starting with space. Do you know how astronauts eat in zero gravity? An Emirati astronaut has released a video. His unusual way of spreading honey on a piece of bread is a must-watch. We will show you how he does it. Meanwhile, do you feel nervous on flights? What is it that makes you nervous? Turbulence? Well, passengers on Southwest Airlines experienced something far worse. They saw the plane's engine catching fire. The flight en route Cancun in Mexico had to make an emergency landing. And a 4-meter whale was found dead on the Peruvian coast. We'll show you drone footage of it. And finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1994, the French troops pulled out of the East African nation of Rwanda. This came after ethnic tension reached its peak. Thousands of Tutsis and many Hutus were murdered. But on August 21st, France's highly controversial mission in Rwanda came to an end. We're leaving you with that. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.